¿Qué tal?
Hello, good afternoon, everybody. Good afternoon to all those of you who are here face to face, those of you who are in streaming. Want to thank the foundation, the Telefonica Foundation. I also want to thank the Debate Publishing House for bringing us one of the most unsettling books I have read in a very, very long time. And you'll be able to buy it afterwards. For the author. Well, after what the author is going to tell us in about an hour that we're going to be having this meeting, and if what you hear is as exciting as I think it is, the mission by Tim Weiner is somehow an update of a previous book he wrote, which was a true bestseller published in 2007, but it also poses us a question, which is what are the secret services in an open democracy, and what's their mission in a world in which there are all sorts of uncertainties from a geopolitical perspective, and the only certainties we've got is that Tim Weiner is a reporter and a journalist that has walked through Afghanistan, Mexico, Sudan, Pakistan, that, by the way, are great places to get to know CIA spies. So that's where he got his part of his information from. Besides knowing, of course, all the main officers in Washington, he won the award when he was in Philadelphia. And what we know as well, according to the author, is that this book that he finished writing in April this year couldn't be published today, at least not as he wrote it, as he developed it. And that is why, besides welcoming him, I have one first question. Tim Weiner, welcome to Madrid once again, welcome to Spain. Thank you for being here with us.
Buenas noches y discúlpeme.
And well, thank you, and thank you for being here. And I'm sorry, but my Spanish is not good enough for a formal interview. It's a mess. It's not true, but let's go. Andele. So, Tim, what happened since you finished writing and the book just 6 or 7 months ago for you to say that you would not be able to write or publish this book today? What changed in the United States and CIA? And what I say that you couldn't actually publish this book?
Mission depends on more than 100 on-the-record interviews with CIA officers and analysts and CIA directors, and the reporting, almost all of it, took place before Trump took office again 9 months ago. And the political climate in the United States now is one of fear and secrecy and ignorance. And the fear definitely has a chilling effect on the ability of CIA officers, both retired and serving, to talk on the record with me, among other things. Everybody at the CIA today is keeping their heads down lest they be chopped off.
Algunas de las fuentes, porque es
some of the sources, because this is a special book, because many former officials, but also some of the officials who are working at the CIA today have talked to you, and you can quote them with their names. Has any of them asked you to get out of the book, or to be erased from the book? Because I know there have been issues for some of the most veteran intelligence agents after the mission was published.
There's only one CIA officer, a very good one, who asked me to take his name out of the book. He feared, he's out of the CIA but he's still working with the United States. He still has a security clearance above top secret, and he feared retribution from the Trump administration.
Está habiendo problemas para los...
So there are issues with the journalists. Well, they're having trouble to inform from the Pentagon, and so some of the journalists who are publishing something that does not come from official sources are not being allowed in. So that's a lethal way of killing a job like the one you have developed throughout your career.
See today in the United States not only attacks on freedom of the press, but on the rule of law itself. It's very difficult, even if you are an American and you read 5 newspapers a day and you're always online, to absorb the totality of what is happening and what Trump is doing. There's a fresh outrage every 15 minutes. But the attack that Trump is waging on the institutions that the United States and its allies created after World War II, starting 80 years ago, the architectures of American national security and intelligence designed to protect the United States and its allies from, among other things, Russian imperialism. He's destroying them, and the attack started at the CIA 3 days after he was inaugurated. The man he chose to run the CIA, a real MAGA warrior named John Ratcliffe, started this destruction by imposing an ideological purity test on senior CIA officers and analysts. They had to answer a little oral quiz. Who did you vote for in the last election? Who really won the 2020 election? And what did you think about the insurrection at the Capitol on January 6th, 2021? And a lot of very senior, very experienced CIA officers and analysts couldn't pass this test. And so there began a purge of people who could not prove that they were on el equipo de Trump. I don't want to compare the two regimes at all, but I was reminded that in the Cambodia of Pol Pot, people were purged because they wore glasses, because they could read. And the people being purged out of the CIA, the FBI, and the Pentagon are being purged because they see things clearly.
Pero hay una cosa, Tim, que tú dices.
Tim, but there's one thing that you say in your book, which is that ideology is the enemy of intelligence services. So it is, I mean, maybe a service like the CIA is at the service of the government, that's one thing, but something different is to do, say, and transmit information, biased information, due to its ideology, to make the supreme boss happier. That boss was the president of the United States. And please, just allow me to, because Tim Weiner, I mean, he speaks his mind. He's always done that all throughout his career, but he's even clearer now. He says that the clearest danger for the national security of the United States in this century is its leader, because he is an individual, right? That's, I believe that he didn't say the president, because he admires dictators. He aspires to rule as an autocrat. He despises liberties, and he threatens to put his opponents in jail. And he has the support of the Supreme Court that said that presidents cannot be processed for crimes done during their mandate. Is that unsettling, or is it not unsettling?
The Americans fought a bloody revolution nearly 250 years ago against the British so that we would have no king. The danger today is that Trump is governing as if he were a king. He has 6 of the 9 justices on the Supreme Court in his pocket. He has his MAGA acolytes in the Congress are playing dead. The Congress is not functioning at all. And the federal government now has been shut down for a month on Trump's orders because the Republicans in Congress can't pass a budget. That's their only constitutional obligation, is to pass a budget. And they won't do it. They can't do it. So what we were seeing could be the collapse of the constitutional order in the United States, a collapse that Trump is creating. Democracy is a fragile thing. It's easier to destroy than to create. Now, why is Trump doing this? Let's focus on the instruments of national security. He hates and despises the CIA. Why? He's not a leftist. Because it was the CIA that established the ironclad evidence that Vladimir Putin had helped elect Trump in 2016, and that members of Trump's team had joined Team Putin. And he's been on a jihad against the United States, against the CIA ever since. Same with the FBI. And of course, the danger here, as Trump swings a wrecking ball through the agencies of national security and intelligence, is that it increases the danger of a catastrophic systemic intelligence failure, not unlike what happened in the months before 11/9. And increases the risk of a surprise attack on the United States or its allies anywhere in the world. What do you think Trump would do if the United States were attacked, at home or abroad? I believe, just my opinion, that he would declare martial law and cancel the next elections. And then our lovely experiment in participatory democracy is over.
Wow.
Whoa. Now, Putin, former KGB agent, a man who has he has worked on his vision of what the great Russia should be. And well, Tim is very knowledgeable about the Cold War and how the CIA and secret services in what's considered as their biggest success, which was to end the Cold War and finish with the USSR. And well, now they have an ally in the White House in the United States, and they helped him in the election during the presidency of 2016, and in a situation that you describe in your book, which is that the CIA was not able to detect the whole disinformation campaign that was being developed in the networks and that Russian was creating, besides the emails from Hillary Clinton and the Department of State. And so how is it possible that the CIA did not know about that cyber attacks, and that the ability, that this information ability that the Russians have been able to develop in such an efficient way, not just in the United States, also in some other countries?
A former director of the CIA, who I know pretty well, General Mike Hayden, called the Russian covert operation that helped elect Trump the most successful operation of its kind since the Trojan horse. And it is true that the CIA did not see it happening as it was happening. They were looking at what the Russians were doing, but not understanding it. They were staring at it like a cow watching a train go by. They didn't really understand what they were seeing until it was too late. Now, in early January of 2017, before he was inaugurated, the CIA and the FBI met with Trump, and they said, we have reached this conclusion, and we need you to know this is what we found as you're going to be president in 10 days. A few months later, in the late spring of 2017, there was a new chief of spies, a new chief of the clandestine service at the CIA. And his name, which appears in this book for the first time, this man didn't exist in the public record. His name is Tomas Rakusan. Tom Rakusan is Czech. His parents were Czech. His roots are Czech. He was 9 years old when Soviet tanks rolled into Czechoslovakia in 1968 to crush the Prague Spring and its resistance to Russian imperialism. His personal feelings about the Russians are strong. Tom Rakusan called in all his top operations officers, most of whom had been doing counterterrorism every day for 15 years after 9/11. And he said to them, look here, pardon my language, I'm quoting him directly. He said, mire, the Russians just manipulated our fucking election. How do we make sure that this never happens again? And he told them, I want you to take the talents that you have developed in targeting terrorists. And targeting doesn't mean killing them. Targeting means discovering who are they? What are their true names? What is the pattern of their life? Who do they love? Who do they hate? With the goal of recruiting them to become agents, informants, for the CIA in the United States. And Rakusan told his people, I want you to take your talents for targeting people and turn it on the Russians. I want you to recruit Russian spies, Russian diplomats, Russian oligarchs. I don't care if you don't speak Russian. I don't care if you've never been to Moscow. Do it. And the result 4 years later was that the CIA stole Vladimir Putin's war plans for the invasion of Ukraine. The CIA had been trying to penetrate the Kremlin since 1947, a record that previously was unblemished by success. And they did it. And then the head of the CIA, who was a guy named Bill Burns, appointed by Joe Biden. Burns is probably recognized as the greatest American diplomat of his generation. He'd been Deputy Secretary of State, ambassador to Moscow and to Jordan. And he said to the president, we need to tell the world about this. The CIA is not normally in the habit of telling the world when it steals a secret, but Burns was practicing his own brand of intelligence diplomacy. And so the president said, good, do it. the CIA told the world about it through the Secretary of State. And the world, and notably the nations of NATO, said, really? Aren't you the people that told us that Saddam Hussein had weapons of mass destruction 18 years ago? Are you quite sure? And the CIA said, yeah, we're sure about this. And they were right. And while this didn't stop the invasion, it did have an immediate, electrifying, galvanizing effect on the nations of NATO, and was an important factor in the survival of Ukraine. One more thought on this. Imagine for a moment that you are a CIA officer and that you have been working for 10 years since the Russian invasion of Ukraine in 2014 and the seizure of Crimea and the eastern Donbass, that you have been working for the survival of Ukraine and against Russian imperialism. And that's been your job for 10 years. And you wake up in the morning last February 24th, and you see that the President of the United States has ordered that America will vote with Russia, North Korea, and Iran against a United Nations resolution condemning the Russian invasion of Ukraine on the 3rd anniversary of that disaster. And you look at this news and you think to yourself, my God, the President of the United States has gone over to the other side. He has joined the authoritarian axis. And you ask yourself, what am I doing with my life? Why am I here?
Y la pregunta es, ¿qué?
And the question is, what are agents doing, especially the most senior ones in the CIA, because in their blood and part of their DNA is to fight against the USSR. And they have worked with the Ukraine hand in hand. And because Tim explains in his book, I mean, for Russians to desert or to provide information to the United States, it's treason. But talking to a Ukrainian who's a brother, I mean, they have the same origin. That's not as hard. So,
two guys having a beer.
Ya, exacto.
Correct. That's it. So, how does that work within the CIA? So you follow the orders coming from the president or the director of your office, but how much can you resist if there's a witch hunt and this kind of ideological purge? And not just because whether or not you support the president, but I understand it also includes what your position is towards Russia. So who survives that?
It's important to understand, and it took me a long time to really understand this after I started covering the CIA back in the 1980s, that the CIA is an executor of American foreign policy. It's the pointed end of the spear of American foreign policy. It doesn't dream up major, covert actions on its own. I mean, do you really think a couple of CIA officers were sitting around in Miami in 1960 on their second or third martini, and one of them said to the other, hey, I've got a great idea. Let's go kill Fidel Castro. That's not how it happened. It was President Eisenhower and President Kennedy who wanted that job done. The CIA has said no to presidents very rarely, but on at least one occasion it changed the course of history. The date was June 23rd, 1972, The Watergate break-in had happened 6 days before. The President of the United States, Richard Nixon, had sent a gang of 6 former CIA and FBI veterans into the offices of the Democratic Party's National Committee's headquarters, just like the Russians broke in to the Democratic Party headquarters many years later, and they'd been caught. 6 days later, the president called the head of the CIA into his office. The man was Richard Helms, a man I got to know quite well later in his life. And the president of the United States said to the director of the CIA, "I want you to tell the FBI to back off this investigation. It's a matter of national security." And of course, the tapes are rolling in the Oval Office. And Richard Helms thinks about this, and he realizes that the president has asked him to enter into a criminal conspiracy to obstruct justice. And he says no to Nixon. That conversation, once the tapes were revealed, was the end of Richard Nixon's presidency. It is possible for the CIA to say no to presidents, but it doesn't happen very often.
I'd like to go back to the beginning of the book just to get out of the present administration of the United States, because the book tells the story of the CIA in the first years of the century, but everything starts in September 11th, 2001. Al-Qaeda's attacks in New York, the Pentagon, the attack. The CIA, and then this is what Tim's explains in his book, had warned over 30 times the President Bush of the fact that a terrorist attack could take place, and there were many possibilities or probabilities of this attack happening, but they hadn't been able to convince the president of a real threat. And when it happened, besides the huge commotion and what you explained, one of the most terrible parts of this chapters in this book, because you explain the inability to find an answer. Of course, all the evidences that were created to invade Afghanistan and Iraq. But there's one sentence in one of the chapters in which you say, it is true that the United States was blind towards Al-Qaeda, and Bob Gates says, we had no fucking idea about Al-Qaeda, and that's a quote, right? So the United States and the CIA and the intelligence services knew nothing about Al-Qaeda, and also, well, they knew nothing about Al-Qaeda, but they were blind in Afghanistan, and that caused, we can talk about it afterwards, but that created some sort of a psychosis, and it is understandable, but the country felt threatened, of course. But also, what could you do in front of an enemy such as Osama bin Laden and Al-Qaeda, an enemy that was very hard to stop, to detect, to find, and to penetrate by CIA agents? That's how the story of the CIA starts in the 21st century.
On the 12th of September 2001, the CIA knew almost nothing about Al-Qaeda. They knew that Osama bin Laden was its leader. They had known that Al-Qaeda had declared war on the United States, and they had known that there were plans to do something spectacular, but where, when, they had no idea. So on the 12th of September, the CIA knew nothing about the command structure of Al-Qaeda, who was who in Al-Qaeda, how they moved money and people around, and where they were located outside of Afghanistan. the CIA also had been accused of failing to connect the dots that would have provided a picture of the coming attack. So what its director, George Tenet, a man I used to know quite well, did was he called every intelligence service in the world, friendly and not friendly, and he said, I want you to send me all the threat information that you have, no matter how far-fetched or unlikely, just give it to me. And so every morning at the White House for months and months on end, a cascade of dots came pouring into the Oval Office at 8 o'clock in the morning. They have a nuclear weapon in New York Harbor. They're going to hit Los Angeles with chemical attacks. They have bioweapons that they're going to spray all over the... And George Tenet, the head of the CIA, told me later, you could go crazy believing half of this, and we didn't know which half to believe. Mm-hmm. So I won't call it a psychosis, a deep fear gripped the White House in Washington, and the CIA went out on a desperate attempt to gather intelligence about Al-Qaeda, having convinced itself and the president that there was a third, a fourth, a fifth attack coming, and that the second attack was going to happen in 15 minutes. And this is why the president authorized the CIA to create the secret prisons and to torture prisoners inside it in the hope that they would get the information about Al-Qaeda's plans and Al-Qaeda's command structure. Because the CIA didn't have any spies inside Al-Qaeda. And didn't for years on end. When it finally did recruit people from Al-Qaeda, and it did, the CIA stations in Islamabad, Pakistan, and Kabul, Afghanistan, achieved that in 2007, 2008, 2009. That was the information that blazed the trail to bin Laden's hideout in Abbottabad, Afghanistan. The CIA would have you believe, and they certainly convinced the director of the film Zero Dark 30, which many of you may have seen, that torture was the key to getting the vital intelligence that led to bin Laden's door. That is a lie. We're Americans, and we are the United States of amnesia, and we don't know or particularly value history. Where did the CIA get its techniques for torture, waterboarding, sleep deprivation for 7, 8, 9, 10 days on end? Well, it got them from the Air Force and the Navy, which have programs to train pilots if they're shot down to resist torture, and they teach them how to resist by torturing them. Where did the Air Force and the Navy get these techniques? From the testimonies of American pilots who were downed in North Vietnam. And why were the North Vietnamese torturing the American prisoners? It wasn't to get intelligence. The downed pilots didn't know when the next bombing run was going to happen. It was torturing them to elicit lies for propaganda. The methodologies were designed to elicit lies.
Tú explicas en el libro.
You explain in your book how a great deal of the information that supposedly comes from that that torture had been acquired previously through other means. So more efficient ways to get valuable information rather than waterboarding or sleep deprivation. I mean, so that part of it, of the book, is quite explicit, right? You're not hiding what was done in those detention centers in Abu Ghraib, Baghdad, Guantanamo, or in Poland.
The mission of the CIA is espionage. That's why it was created. It was never created to be a lethal paramilitary army. It was never created to build secret prisons or to torture people inside of them. It was never created to overthrow other countries. You want to overthrow a country? Call in the Marines. It was created for espionage. Espionage is the quintessence. Espionage is the essence of the CIA's mission, and recruiting foreign agents is the quintessence of the mission. To get a Russian or a Chinese or a North Korean or a Somalian to cooperate, to get them to commit treason against their country or their tribe. And it was the recruitment of Al-Qaeda operatives that provided the intelligence that led to the death of bin Laden. It was easier in the Cold War and in the years immediately thereafter for the CIA to recruit a Russian or a Chinese because the United States could say with a straight face, we stand for freedom and democracy in the world. The United States can't say that anymore. And thus the recruitment of foreign agents has become exponentially more difficult.
But I understand that it's not just recruiting that's harder in a global world and a diverse world. I understand that your analysts, your spies, your agents have to reflect that those worlds, not just Afghan, Chinese, Taiwanese, Polish, Czech, so from El Salvador or Mexico. So how is it, I mean, are the new guidelines in the new CIA about non-diversity, because I'm just remembering Pete Hegseth, Secretary of Defense, and when he was talking to just a month ago when they all went to Quantico to demand to behave as men, right, and do more and exercise more, and well, they're women in the army, and there are gays in the army. I mean, in the United States Army and anywhere else in any other army, there are people from different races, religions, and from diverse social and economic backgrounds. Is that compatible? So I'm talking about the army now, but probably applicable as well to intelligence services. So is that compatible with the needs we've got in the 21st century? On having intelligence services that can enter the more complex realities in the world?
So among the other things that the new CIA director appointed by Trump has done was not simply to purge the upper ranks of people who wouldn't pledge allegiance to Donald Trump. He fired everyone, hundreds of people. The CIA had trained to become spies in 2023 and 2024 because they were Biden hires. Most of these people had been training to join the CIA's newly created China Mission Center to spy on China. The CIA director, John Radcliffe, then sent their true first names and true first initials of these hundreds of people to the White House in an unclassified email to prove to Trump and Elon Musk, look what I did. I fired all these Biden hires. I'm cutting costs. I guarantee you that the Chinese intelligence service can read the unclassified email systems of the White House. All these people now have a target on their back. It's a counterintelligence nightmare. Because the Chinese are good at recruiting people, particularly if they're angry and out of a job. The third thing the third thing that John Radcliffe did, echoing Pete Hegseth, the Secretary of Defense, was to abolish the CIA's long-standing 40-year-old policies for diversity in hiring people who are going to be spies. Why does the CIA have a diversity policy in hiring? Is the CIA woke? No. The CIA has a policy for diversity in hiring spies on the very good foundation that sending an all-white cadre out to spy in China or Pakistan or Somalia is a terrible idea. The spy needs to swim in the sea of the people. The spy needs an understanding of the languages and cultures of the countries they're spying in. Diversity was one of the CIA's superpowers. It's how they don't get caught. The net effect of all this is to decrease the intelligence quotient of the CIA by about 10 or 15 points. This creates a danger. There's yet another danger. The CIA depends enormously on liaisons with foreign intelligence services. The CIA by itself is not a global intelligence agency. It doesn't have the people. It doesn't have the languages. It doesn't have the country experience. So it relies on liaisons with more than 60 different foreign intelligence services, including those of countries that you would never think of as American allies, to get a picture of the world. Many of these foreign intelligence services are not trusting Trump's CIA or Trump's national security officers with their secrets. And this started with the United States cutting off intelligence reporting on Russia, not just to its allies, but to the Congress. So what you're seeing is, I don't know how else to describe it. I will use the phrase of the former CIA director, Bill Burns. He called what is happening a strategic self-immolation, setting the place on fire.
Tim, tú mencionas que el papel...
Tim, you mentioned that the role of agents, of spies, and the role of journalists, when we are correspondents, it's not that different, really. Precisely because you go to an environment or to a country that's not yours, you learn the language, and you make friends, you get new contacts, leads, and you try to find out what's happening, and you try to go to the right sources. And to do that, you have to get their trust. You have to get them to trust you. And the difference is that spies use it to create reports and provide their state with relevant information, and we do it to tell our readers. But on both cases, there's something very important. There's another piece, which is who you report to. If you have a good editor, he'll ask you to make sure that the facts that you're telling are precise, real, and as close as possible to reality. If you are a good agent, you will probably have a director that values quality information, not what his boss wants to hear. So let me ask you about journalism. What do you think about journalism? In that picture you've drawn about the present situation in the United States, and something that's been that the new president's done is to attack constantly and the media, trying to discredit us, really. So, in your opinion, what's the role of journalism or the press in your country, but in general? We have global issues. We share the feeling that this is the end of an era, and working against the power is very hard when, from an economic perspective, it's also hard to survive. So looking back to your career and seeing what your colleagues do now and looking at the difficulties to inform about what's actually happening.
Complicado. The concentration of power by a handful of billionaires, both in American newspapers, in American broadcasting, and in big tech, is truly terrifying. We are in danger of losing our democracy in the United States. And if we lose it, one of the causes will be a crackdown on information by the billionaire impresarios who are falling all over themselves today to kiss Trump's ring. The Washington Post is, for now, bereft of 100 talented journalists who have gone elsewhere because Jeff Bezos, who owns the Washington Post, has imposed a right-wing editorial stance. Now, the United States traditionally is different from European papers. The papers are not overtly right-wing or left-wing. They're centrists. That tradition is in danger. The New York Times is doing quite well, thank you. And will continue to do quite well, in part because the talented journalists from the Washington Post are all going to work for the New York Times. What I truly worry about is that the oligarchs, Bezos, Peter Thiel, a billionaire who is getting heavily into information systems, the people who will control automated intelligence systems, will start to kill free speech and a free press in the United States, thus serving one of the ultimate aims of Trump. Trump, like all autocrats, wants you to believe that there are no facts and there is no truth, and that you might as well just give up and go home and play video games. Everything's a lie, except what I say. There will still be powerful defenders of the free press and of free speech, no matter what. but their numbers are dwindling.
There are many things, I'm sorry, but I mean, Venezuela, China. We haven't talked about the role of the CIA. It is true that the CIA is not there to overthrow governments, but I mean, they have supported it. So yes, let's talk about Venezuela. And I can ask you about it, and please, because we are going to have a few minutes to ask some questions. I believe we'll have some microphones. Let's talk about Venezuela, and then, of course, if you have questions, please raise your hand. And well, before Tim can go ahead and sign books, he will probably like to hear what you have to ask.
¿Puede Trump?
So can Trump overthrow Maduro? Can he start a war against Venezuela?
Sure. Here's the problem. So the CIA and the National Intelligence Council, which is the premier secret government think tank for all the best intelligence analysts, military and civilian, throughout the US government, has repeatedly reported, contrary to everything that Trump says about Venezuela, that Venezuela is not at war with the United States. Venezuela is not emptying its prisons and sending thousands of psychopathic criminals into the United States. Venezuela is not a major trafficker of fentanyl, and Maduro is not el jefe de los narcotraficantes, okay? This reporting became public, thanks to a free press. And then Trump said, that's bullshit, ripped up the report, and told the National Intelligence Council to try again. They wrote another report, which was even stronger in contradicting Trump. And then Trump fired the head of the National Intelligence Council to make sure that there would be no third report. Covert operations and military operations without good intelligence are an invitation to a tragedy or a farce, or maybe both. And Trump is willfully ignorant of the intelligence. I guarantee you he is ignorant of the history of CIA golpes in the Western Hemisphere, and no good can come of this.
Yeah.
Let's acknowledge that Maduro is a terrible leader, a dictator. He stole the last election, but in response to Maduro's presence, the United States military, aided by the CIA, is now blowing boats out of the water in the Caribbean. They've hit 7 boats. They've killed about 36 people, and that's murder. That is murder under the laws of war, under international law, and under laws of the United States. And that's one reason that Pete Hegseth, the Secretary of Defense, fired all the lawyers at the Pentagon. This is an attack on the rule of law, one of 100 that Trump has undertaken. Everybody happy?
¿Es inquietante o no es?
Is it unsettling or is it not unsettling? The book is unsettling, but what Tim's saying as well. Questions you want to ask the author directly? I see 2 hands here, and some others as well. If you're concise, please, let's try to answer as many questions as possible.
2 quick ones, because I think these are 2 weak spots of Trump administration. One is, I would like to ask you for your opinion on CIA take on the Epstein's files. And the second is because this is also going on with these MAGA circles nowadays, the level of influence of Israel in United States policies. Thanks.
Okay.
Muy bien. La primera es fácil. La CIA no tiene nada que decir con respecto a los archivos de Epstein. No tiene poderes policiales en los Estados Unidos. Ese fracaso no tiene nada que ver con ellos. Cuando se creó en el Estado de Israel en el 48, la única persona del gobierno de Estados Unidos que estaba a favor era el presidente Harry Truman.
Ever since, White House support for the government of Israel has been 100%. To my knowledge, which is not complete, the CIA has had no role in the genocide of the Palestinians. Of course, the American military has had a role because it gives the bombs to the Israelis. Back in 1948, there was one person at the CIA who had control of the relationship with Israel, and he had control of it for 24 years. A very interesting man named James Jesus Angleton. He was also the chief of counterintelligence. And the deal held for many years was that the CIA said to the leaders of Israel and of their intelligence services, we're not going to help you against the Arabs. We have our own relationship with the Arabs. We will give you all the intelligence that we think you need. However, we won't help you operationally. In exchange, we want you to get hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of Jews out of Russia and Poland who have access to intelligence about Stalin and bring them to Israel so we can work with them. And that was the foundational deal. I don't think that the CIA has an official view of what the Israelis are doing, but the officers and analysts that I know are horrified.
I don't know what the mics are. Yes. Thank you very much, Mr. Weiner. Thank you very much for being so brave. Thank you very much for your bravery. And I hope such an interesting conversation and terrifying as well for some of us has no consequences for you when you go back to the United States. Fortunately, I believe that the American ambassador, after a year and a half, well, he's not here yet, and we have no ambassador, American ambassador here in Spain, but
Bad.
Exacto.
yes, maybe, yeah, given the circumstances. But you have mentioned that the CIA is an annex. It's yet another part of of American politics, and that's set by the president. So right now, the point in which with Europe and with some countries of Europe, there's a bit more of a strain. Can the CIA, can they send the CIA against or to have a negative impact on some European countries, or maybe within those European countries, maybe try to have influence on elections that are more aligned with Trump's ideology? Or are we still somewhere else?
Al contrario. As we speak here tonight, Russia is at war with the democratic states of Europe. War. You can't see it, but it's there. And it's not just espionage, it's sabotage, subversion, assassination, political warfare, bribery. And the aim that Putin has is to make sure that democracy dies in Europe and that far-right parties who represent Christian nationalism and hate people who are not white come to power and stay in power. If Putin is allowed to keep 1 millimeter of Ukraine seized by conquest, and again, as we speak, Trump is trying to ram a deal on Russia's terms down Ukraine's throat. If he is allowed to keep 1 hectare of Ukraine, do you think he's going to stop there? One interesting thing about the CIA, yes, the agency is an instrument of American foreign policy, but it only needs the president's approval for covert action, not for espionage, because that's its mission. I guarantee you that CIA officers today are working against Russia's covert warfare in Europe.
Well, let's hope.
Very interesting insights. One quick question. We've talked a lot about Putin and Trump. Do you think there is something to the proposition that Putin has something personal on Trump?
Compromat.
Is there something to it, or is it just Trump is just a mercurial idiot?
You, like about 1 million other journalists, diplomats, spies, American citizens, are wondering, as we've all wondered from time to time over the past 10 years, what is this strange romance between Trump and Putin? Is it possible that back in 1987, the KGB somehow recruited Trump? Trump came to Moscow in 1987, a rich, corrupt real estate developer who wanted to build a fancy hotel in partnership with the Soviet government just around the corner from Red Square. He was not only a corrupt person. I grew up in New York City. I've been knowing Trump for a long time, okay? But he had a pronounced taste for Slavic women. He was publicly cheating on his first wife. And he was greedy. And he was an egomaniac. And he had an enormous ego that demanded flattery. If the KGB didn't try to recruit him in 1987, they were guilty of criminal negligence. However, Trump didn't take a suitcase full of Kremlin gold under a bridge in Vienna that year. And there's no evidence, and unless someday in the distant future when the Russian intelligence archives are opened and there's a big big file that says D-Trump on it, and that's open, we'll never know. But there's a particular term of art at the CIA, and that term is agent of influence. An agent of influence is not a recruited agent who's taking money, a recruited agent who's been blackmailed or compromised. He is someone in a position of power who uses his power to advance the foreign policy objectives of a hostile country. Well, that shoe fits. Okay. In the end, I think the mystery has been solved. Trump is not Putin's agent. He's Putin's ally.
Tim, is this...
Well, I wish you all a very good night. I hope you don't have any nightmares. Thank you very much. We have to finish. You have to go and meet your readers, and the depth of this book, the analyses made here, and the valuable information of the sources he has checked, make it an essential read to understand what we had faced and what we're going to face in the future. We expect your next book about the following 25 years.
Thing.
Sí.
I live in hope. I am an optimist. My mother was born in Nuremberg 100 years ago, and she and her family had to flee, and they fled to Paris, which at first looked like a good idea. It didn't work out. And Paris fell, and then for 2 years, my mother and her mother made their way with great difficulty to Marseille and then Casablanca. And in March of 1942, they got the second to last boat that crossed the Atlantic with German refugees. And they were 2 years in a refugee camp in Havana. And they finally made it into the United States 7 years after they left Germany. And my mother heard about a program for young women like herself. She was then 19. And 2 years later, she was graduated with honors from Smith College, which is the most prestigious women's college in the United States, and went on to become quite a renowned history professor. And I don't want my daughters to grow up in a dictatorship, and I'm going to do what I can through my work to prevent that from happening. But every time I even have a hint of despair that's creeping into my soul, I think of my mother.